The storm was gathering strength, its winds bending the grass and carrying the sharp scent of rain. Snow White, a young girl with a heart as fierce as her namesake, pulled her coat tighter, her boots pressing into the softening earth. She had been wandering the edges of the wild lands, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain, when a sound stopped her cold. A low, pained whinny, raw with desperation. It wasn't just any cry, it was a plea for help. Her pulse quickened as she moved toward it, stepping carefully over uneven ground, the fading light casting long shadows around her. Then she saw her, a wild Mustang mare lying half on her side, her coat slick with sweat, her breaths shallow and ragged. The mare was in labor, struggling, her body trembling with exhaustion. Snow White's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. The foal wasn't coming. Most would have turned away, left the wild creature to her fate, but Snow White couldn't. She knew time was slipping away. The mare's strength was fading, the storm was closing in, and if nothing changed, neither the mare nor her unborn foal would make it. Snow White had grown up around animals, learning their ways, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold, for what the mare would do just minutes after the birth, a moment that would leave her breathless. The mare's eyes, wide with fear, locked onto Snow White as she approached. Every muscle in the Mustang's body tensed, her nostrils flaring, yet she didn't bolt. Even in her pain, even on the edge of collapse, she stayed. Snow White dropped to one knee, her voice soft but steady. "You're running out of time, girl," she whispered. She could see the foal's hooves just emerging, stuck, trapped in a way that spelled danger for both mother and child. If she didn't act now, they'd both be lost. The air was thick with the mare's labored breathing, underscored by the distant rumble of thunder. Snow White moved quickly but carefully. She'd helped animals before, but never a wild Mustang, never one that would rather fight than let a human near. Yet here this mare was, her body still, her eyes searching Snow White's face. It was as if she knew she had no choice but to trust. Snow White knelt in the dirt, ignoring the wind biting through her coat. The foal's front hooves were out, but its head was caught. A breech birth, the kind that could end in tragedy. The mare groaned, her body shuddering, too weak to push any longer. Snow White took a deep breath. Her hands steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. She reached in, her fingers wrapping around the foal's fragile legs, feeling the faint pulse of life beneath her touch. The foal was alive, but only just. Time was slipping away. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the scene in a stark flash. Snow White braced herself, her boots sinking into the mud, and pulled gently. Nothing. She tried again, harder. Still nothing. The mare's body stiffened, her strength fading. "No, you don't get to give up," Snow White muttered, her voice fierce. She adjusted her grip, feeling for the foal's tiny muzzle, tilting its head downward as she'd once been shown. Then she pulled with everything she had. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, the foal slid free. Snow White stumbled back, gasping, the tiny creature limp in her arms. It wasn't moving. Her heart pounded as she shook it gently, her voice breaking. "Come on, little one." Panic clawed at her, but she rubbed the foal's ribs, urging it to breathe. "Come on." Then, a sharp, shallow gasp. The foal's chest rose, fell, and rose again. It was alive. Snow White let out a shaky breath, relief flooding her body. Then she heard it. A sound so faint it nearly vanished in the wind. The mare whinnied, weak but unmistakable, as she stretched her neck toward her foal. She was alive, and so was her baby. Against all odds, they had made it. Snow White sat back, her hands trembling, watching the mare nuzzle her newborn. But what happened next stopped her cold. The mare's dark eyes met hers, not with fear or defiance, but with something Snow White had never seen in a wild creature before. Trust. Snow White had spent her life watching animals, learning their instincts, their boundaries. She'd seen wild horses bolt at the sight of humans, mothers guard their young with fierce protectiveness. But this mare, moments after giving birth, didn't run. She stayed. And then she did something that made Snow White's breath catch. She nudged her foal toward her, a gentle push, as if offering her baby to the girl who had saved them. Snow White froze, her heart racing. Was it exhaustion, instinct? But no, the mare did it again, deliberate, certain. She was giving her trust, her newborn, to Snow White. "I won't hurt him," Snow White whispered, her voice barely audible. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing the foal's damp coat. The tiny creature squeaked, uncertain but alive. Snow White's throat tightened. She'd seen foals born, helped them stand, watched them grow, but never like this. Never with a wild Mustang mother watching her every move. Never in the middle of a storm. Never with such fragile trust hanging between them. The mare let out a weary breath, her head sinking to the ground. She was exhausted, her body spent. Snow White glanced around. The storm was growing fiercer, the air sharp with rain. They couldn't stay here. The foal needed warmth, shelter. She made a choice. Carefully, she lifted the foal, its small body trembling against her chest, its fur sticking to her coat. She looked at the mare. "I'll bring him back," she said softly. The mare's eyes held hers, steady, believing. That trust, that moment, was everything to Snow White. The first raindrops stung her face as she stepped away, cradling the foal. Thunder growled closer, the ground turning slick beneath her boots. She moved toward shelter, a barn she knew wasn't far. Then she heard it, a faint, unsteady shuffle behind her. She glanced back, and her breath caught. The mare was trying to stand, her legs shaking, her body barely able to hold her weight. She was too weak, yet she was moving, following Snow White, refusing to let her foal out of her sight. Snow White's chest ached. Wild Mustangs didn't follow humans. They fled, vanished into the vastness. But this mare was different. She was choosing to trust, to follow the girl who had saved her baby. Snow White kept walking, not daring to look back, praying the mare's strength would hold. The rain pounded harder, turning the earth to mud. Then she heard it, soft, uneven hoofbeats trailing her. The mare was coming, step by painful step. By the time they reached the barn, Snow White was soaked, her arms aching from carrying the foal. She set the tiny creature on a bed of dry hay, covering it with a blanket. Turning, she saw the mare stagger through the open doors, her legs trembling, but her eyes fixed on her foal. Ignoring Snow White, she sank down beside her baby, her breath warm against its coat. Snow White stood frozen, watching them. For the first time, she felt something shift inside her, a connection, unspoken but undeniable. The rain battered the barn's roof, each drop a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. The foal lay curled in the hay, its breathing uneven, too weak. Snow White knelt beside it, her fingers brushing its fragile frame. Cold, far too cold. It needed warmth, milk, time they didn't have. The mare, whom Snow White silently named Star, lay close, her ears flicking toward every move. Snow White acted fast, grabbing a blanket to drape over the foal, then rushing to light an old stove in the corner. The flames caught, casting a warm glow across the barn, but the foal's weak cry stopped her heart. Hunger, desperation. Star was too depleted to nurse, her body drained from the birth. Snow White cursed softly. The foal needed food now. She grabbed a bottle from a shelf, filling it with milk replacers she'd seen used before. But would Star allow it? She approached slowly, the bottle in hand. Star's ears pinned back, and Snow White froze, her heart pounding. "I'm not taking your baby," she said, her voice steady. Star's eyes flicked from the bottle to the foal, then back. Then, in a moment that changed everything, she lifted her head, not in fear, but in acceptance. Snow White reached out, tilting the bottle to the foal's lips. For a second, nothing. Then a trembling suckle, then another. The foal was drinking. Snow White exhaled, relief washing over her. It was going to live. She believed it now. The storm passed, leaving a crisp dawn behind. Snow White sat against a wooden post, the empty bottle in her hands. Star lay beside her foal, her eyes never leaving it. The tiny creature stirred, stronger now, its legs twitching. Snow White held her breath as it pushed against the hay, wobbling, struggling. Star nickered softly, encouraging. The foal tried again, its knees buckling. Then it stood. Unsteady, trembling, but standing. Snow White's chest tightened. She'd seen first steps before, but never one that meant this much. Star nudged her foal, guiding it toward her. The little one took a shaky step, then another, toward its mother. Snow White blinked back tears. They'd made it. The barn door stood open, morning light spilling in. Star's head turned toward it, the wild calling her. Snow White's heart sank. She'd known this moment would come, but it didn't make it easier. Star was wild, and now her foal was strong enough to follow her into that vast freedom. Snow White stood, watching as Star moved toward the door, her foal, whom she'd named Hope, trailing close. This was it. They were leaving. Snow White had no claim over them, no right to stop them. She'd fought for them, earned their trust, not by force but by being there, by helping. Now they would go. Her chest ached, but maybe that was how it should be. Some bonds weren't meant to be held. Then Star stopped at the threshold. She turned, her dark eyes finding Snow White's. For a long moment they stood still, a silent understanding passing between them. Then Star did something Snow White never expected. She stepped back, away from the wild, toward the barn. Hope followed. Snow White's hands shook. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. Star blinked, then moved closer, not in fear, but in choice. Snow White exhaled, her heart full. She didn't own Star never would, but Star had chosen her. Not because she was forced, not because she was tamed, but because she belonged, not to a place, but to the girl who had saved her and her foal. Some say wild horses can't trust, can't understand. But Star knew. She knew who had fought for her, who had saved her baby. And in that choice, Snow White learned what it meant to be chosen, not by ownership, but by trust. The morning light bathed them, and Snow White stood with Star and Hope, knowing this bond, forged in a storm, would never fade.